Well, after 48 hours of pure Schadenfreude-infused bliss, Democrats finally got their first bit of bad news for 2023. So the bad news is that incumbent Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan has announced that she will not seek re-election in 2024. Now, I know that might not seem like a big deal, and it's not a big deal in the short term, right? It's not going to affect 2023 or even 2024 directly, but it will affect 2025. The fact of the matter is that Michigan is a key battleground state. It's highly competitive. It's a major player in terms of Senate control, in terms of presidential control, and at least in terms of the Senate, the incumbency advantage also applies, right? It's not just the presidency where incumbency matters. Typically, there's an advantage to any incumbent office holder. And in Michigan, which is hotly contested, it's constantly sought after by Republicans and Democrats alike, Stabenow remaining in her seat and running as an incumbent was going to be a huge and arguably necessary advantage that we would need in an otherwise unfavorable 2024 Senate projection. We'll get into that in a second, but let's first just dive into Debbie here. So she's about 72 years old, and she announced Thursday that she would not seek re-election and will retire when her fourth term ends in 2025. This matters because the retirement adds to Michigan's status as a battleground state. And again, the map does not look good for us in 2024. Kind of like how the House map didn't look for us this year, in 2022. In 2024, the current projections are the House will be more favorable to us. We'll have the advantage in terms of regaining the majority in 2024 in the House. But the Senate is looking highly disfavorable. And so Debbie's, Stabenow's retirement here, or her intention to basically cough up that incumbency advantage by retiring, that just it makes the uphill climb even more steep. So she says basically that her decision was, and this obviously is just a public statement, so we don't know, what her private considerations are. We're taking this at face value. But basically she says that she's inspired by, decisions by Nancy Pelosi and others to step aside, kind of the old guard stepping aside and allowing a new generation of leaders to come forth. Now, I don't know entirely, how true that is because Nancy Pelosi is an exception. President Biden, who's 80, says that he intends to run for re-election in 2024 when he'll be 82, right? So he's not stepping aside as of now. Chuck Schumer is in his 70s. Dick Durbin is another one in his 70s. So the Democratic leadership is still relatively aged, right? It's not like we're seeing a mass exodus of the, septuagenarians, octogenarians out of Congress. So I'm not entirely sure how much I buy that, but maybe she sincerely believes that's what she's doing and she wants to move in that direction, which fair enough, but damn, kind of wish she would have waited. But anyway, she said in a statement that she intends to start a new chapter in her life. She will still be intensely focused on continuing important work to improve the lives of Michiganders. So she intends to still be involved in the community in her home state, but she wants to step out of federal Congress and look towards new horizons. She intends to begin a new chapter in her life that includes continuing to serve our state outside of elective office and continuing to spend precious time with my amazing 96-year-old mom and wonderful family. All of which I respect, but just the cynical political wonk in me is so sad that this is happening. And we'll get into some of the critical votes that Stabenow, she was crucial in, right? Especially over the past 2 years with a razor-thin Senate majority. Every vote has mattered. We've had no surplus that we were able to take advantage of. So Stabenow is a reason that the bipartisan infrastructure bill passed, that the third round of COVID relief, the American Rescue Plan passed. She has been there. The Respect for Marriage Act, the PACT Act. These are important bills that probably would not have passed without her presence. So it's important to remember. It's not like she's just, an unnecessary bit of window dressing. She has been a critical player in the Democratic Party, even though she's obviously not as high profile as somebody like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or Chuck Schumer or so on and so forth. Yeah, so she says, I think it's important to know the time and place where you open doors again for others and pass the torch. I feel like this is really the right time for me. It's the right time for Michigan. We'll see about that last part. The big picture. Republicans hope Michigan would be a hook for showcasing their inroads with blue-collar voters. But since then, Republicans have suffered repeated setbacks. So this midterm cycle was really great for Democrats in Michigan. Okay, so again, Stabenow, she retained her seat. Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic governor of Michigan, she was also the victim of the target of a kidnapping plot. She won re-election, and actually Democrats made impressive gains in the state legislature. So the Michigan is controlled by Democrats for the first time. And Republicans have experienced one setback after another, and that's great. That's good. But that was then. This is now. So it also points out that she's been a political dynamo. She beat many Republicans' top in-state talent: Spence Abraham in 2000, Mike Bouchard in 2006, and John James in 2018. But again, with her absence, it increases the likelihood that Republicans will be able to make some serious gains in the Senate in 2024. Stabenow, it was also, back in November, The Hill ran an article about the 8 most vulnerable Democrats in the Senate in 2024. And some of the usual suspects are there. People like Joe Manchin, right? Who right now is probably pissed off everybody in West Virginia because he's seen by, West Virginia is a profoundly red state. They don't like President Biden. They don't like Democrats. And he is seen, I imagine, by many people as being too friendly to the president's agenda. But he's also been supportive of Biden's agenda enough so Republicans don't like him. But he's also been a thorn in the side of Democrats repeatedly enough. It's not like Democrats like him either, so he's pretty vulnerable. Kyrsten Sinema, obviously, because she's probably the most reviled person who is not a member of the Republican Party in Senate politics, and understandably so. She's very vulnerable. And Sherrod Brown, John Tester of Montana. I really like John Tester, but he's vulnerable because Montana is a red state, so he's facing some pretty stiff competition in 2024. And Debbie Stabenow. But she's taking herself out of the race, in 2024, so she won't be vulnerable because she won't be running. But yeah, so this is the first bit of bad news. And again, it's more long-term thinking in the sense that it's not going to affect anything this year or the legislative year in 2024, right? Because she won't retire until January 2025. So, we'll be able to get some mileage out of her for the next 2 years. But just thinking about what Democrats face in 2024 in terms of a presidential election, potentially not only against Donald Trump, but also potentially Ron DeSantis as well. President Biden is still relatively unpopular. Most Democrats don't want him to run again due to that fact and due to his age. This is going to be hotly competitive. And again, the stakes are so high given how bad faith and how anti-democratic the Republican Party is collectively. So we could really have used Stabenow's firepower. And again, I guess there's no guarantee that she would have won re-election had she just chosen to run in 2024. But again, that incumbency advantage, that's something that's tough to give up. So anyway, that's it. Again, Stabenow voted Respect for Marriage Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the PACT Act, the Safer Communities Act, which is the big major bipartisan piece of gun reform, gun safety law back in 2022. And again, just one thing after another. So we have desperately needed her votes. She did her duty. She helped make the country a better place. She helped pass the president's agenda wherever possible. And she will be sorely missed. So fingers crossed for 2024. And in the meantime, I guess we should appreciate what we have in a Democratic-controlled Senate.